And it's the 23rd of November 2018. I wanted to share this bit of findings after putting that series of nanotechnology, nervous system, how to avoid exacerbating nanotechnology or nanosaturation levels, and then putting that together with connecting the food supply to nanotechnology using Tony Pantelleresco's comment. It had me thinking about the external environment that may be considered very common. So what I've done here is I've created a video of all the places I've lived, and to begin with, I grew up in San Fernando Valley in Southern California, and my mother worked at Studio City, and Studio City happens to be on the north side of the Hollywood Hills, and in this valley it's what's considered the porn capital of the world back in the 70s, and so there's 66% of what California, or I should say the pornography production accounted for, mostly came from California. And then there's also the larger area of where it came from globally. So the other part here happens to be on the Hollywood Hills. There's the Getty Museum. And there is a lot of information out there about what's under the Getty Museum. Now, let's see. Hollywood happens to be very popular. There were these recent fires on the Hollywood Hills, and just behind the Hollywood sign is San Fernando Valley, and there's a tower. The interesting thing about this area is violence was very normal. Very normal. Neighbors are getting spanked left and right. Lots of domestic violence, and it appears to be related to these towers. Now, let's see. I lived there from 1971 to 1980, and in 1980 to 1993, my family left the Hawaiian Islands left Los Angeles to go to Waianae. Now, Waianae is has the largest Hawaiian population. Let's see. And a big part of growing up in Waianae in the 70s and the 80s, it's like the most violent area people could find themselves. But that was where the affordable properties were, and it's actually all the crown lands. So these antennas, which are part of a naval base, they have always been there and were installed in 1972. When I arrived in 1980, I of course saw that, and that was just part of the backdrop. The interesting thing about being in a valley is that when there are these towers, it sends out the frequencies. Now, these are very low frequency towers, and the amount of violence that's there in Waianae, I believe it's caused because of this. High violence for domestic violence, a lot of drunkenness. There's a lot of sex offenders. Now, after I graduated from high school and my father passed away, I moved to San Francisco. And let's see, there's this enormous tower there, and there were three options that I could have gone to. I could have gone back to New York, which I'd spent my first year in college in, or I was going to go to Denver. But what I ended up doing was going to San Francisco. So there in San Francisco, you could see I pretty much spent most of my adult life there in San Francisco. And let's see, it's one of those places where it wouldn't seem it, but I nearly had my back broken there in an assault. It's pretty violent situations that I found myself in. Now, for whatever reason, in January 2010, I decided to take my son and we were going to move back to the Hawaiian Islands, and we happened to find ourselves in Aiea, which is up the hillside from Pearl Harbor. Now, Pearl Harbor has this enormous radar, which for the most part is there in Pearl Harbor. I had seen it a couple of times go out to sea, but it would just turn right back around and come back. So the interesting thing about this radar is my brother had reported when I spoke to him on the 11th of November, so just about 2 weeks ago, he was telling me that the frequencies coming out of that was telling him to kill himself. So there appears to be a suicide program. I have another contact who lives in Honolulu, and it's like if anybody on Oahu can see the radar, those radio waves are being passed to the viewer wherever they may be. So the one contact was very low, very depressed. So in 2014, I basically moved to Alfultamum Albus, and I hadn't realized that for the past 4 years, this was actually January of 2014 that I moved here, that I have been irradiated. I've been irradiated for the past 4+ years, and this would explain my underweight, my being underweight, but also the constant backaches and stiffness. It's like these antennas that I'm showing here in the video are of the pathway of just from where we're located, going through town to go to the post office, to go to the train station, to go to the grocery store, to do recycling. So it is through these, let's see, this is only a handful along the main path that I'm walking. And if I went up into the village more or into the housing area just to take a different route to see where the antennas are, and I did do that this morning, I did find more antennas. The antennas are in very close proximity of each other. So my solution, it's really to, I'm going to write letters to let the, this is considered the smallest city, smallest Stadt in Switzerland. So it's Alfultamum Albus, and it happens to have just over 11,000 inhabitants here. Walking through the village this morning, I did see quite a few of my neighbors not looking so sturdy, and I did have a chance to speak to one woman who's actually from Graubünden, and she moved to Alfultum to mainly be near her daughter, or her daughter had her move nearby, so that she wouldn't have to travel over to Graubünden for visits. Anyway, from Graubünden is actually one of the cantons that I would prefer to go to because there's actually less data centers, and I haven't gone to visit the area or the canton, but it's one of 3 or 4 cantons that I would choose to go to, mainly just to get out of Zurich. Now, as a remedy, it would actually be to, there's actually a contact, a Hawaiian contact, and he said the infrastructure is already here. We just need to be put in the driver's seat. So this is a line that actually comes to me, and the infrastructure for healing is already here. We just need to get into the driver's seat, to influence those who are in place, to turn off the health hazardous frequencies, and to turn on the healing frequencies. And from what I'm seeing, it's the frequencies here are currently being turned up. Frequencies, radiation spectrum. It's for the data transfer and also for the updates, and they are scheduled between 2 and 4 in the morning. So that's actually the worst time to wake up because these are the maximum melatonin levels that are being produced. Yes. So I hope that helps where I'm coming from, and I wanted to share that because it's important for people to take a look at their own environment and recognize that all the negative things that happened along the way, they were inflicted by this technology that we really, we really don't have a complete and thorough understanding of. I would say it would be best to work on shielding, because shielding is going to block these frequencies, or to go underground. And my best guess is just from seeing how Rothschilds are there, they are underground. Their shell of a house on the lakeside, it's just a facade, and what's under the ground is really where the living space is. And having been in the basement, the cellar, it's actually a very peaceful place. So look into getting underground to escape the frequency bombardment. Okay, well, I hope this finds all well. Enjoy your weekend. Smo out.